Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So now that the intake manifold is on the Mark IV and the installation process happened in the last video, so if you guys have not watched that yet, pause right now, go watch it, as it was a really good one and the manifold came out awesome. But that being said, what we are working on today, or at least to begin this video, is the new cold side intercooler tube. With the new location of the throttle body on this manifold, sitting out a little bit farther from the plenum as opposed to the old manifold, it made this new intercooler tube pretty simple. So in the intro montage, I cut the pieces I needed to and got everything at least roughed in. And with this piece of aluminum that I cut as kind of a template piece, I have everything, I think, pretty well figured out for it. And what we need to do at this point in time is to cut a section off of this 4-inch titanium tube and then weld it to this lower bend. I can do this flange weld, so on and so forth. I can get this section of the tube knocked out and then focus efforts on the top section that actually attaches to the throttle body. Now the reason I'm doing it this way is I won't have great access to the lower bend to be able to really get in there and see if there are any gaps or any little micro adjustments that need to be done, as opposed to the top bend where I can visualize everything much more easily. So with that being said, let's go ahead and cut a section off of that titanium tube, get it tacked to that lower bend, and test fit, and if everything's good, we can weld those three pieces together, the straight tube, the bend, and the flange, and then we can focus on the upper section of the tube and get it knocked out so it actually attaches to the throttle body. And just like that, the Mark IV's new cold side intercooler tube is completed. The tube came out okay. I'm not 100% satisfied with it, but it will do the job for right now. So the portions I'm not satisfied with, there's a little bit more color than I would like in this upper Wiggins ferrule. In the lower Wiggins ferrule, you can see that I had some aluminum melt onto the flange and make a little bit of a track onto the weld. That isn't going to cause an issue in terms of this tube staying together and doing its job, but it's just the aesthetic portions of it that will end up irritating me, and at some point in time I'll more than likely end up rebuilding this but right now my time is better spent elsewhere. So now that everything is good to go with it, I have the O-rings put back on the Wiggins ferrules. I have the IAT sensor put in place, obviously the bung welded and all of that. It's now time to install this. Once the tube is installed onto the car, then I can shift my focus over to the fuel lines and get them knocked out. And that should be the last thing prohibiting me from starting this car and hearing the beautiful 2JZ noises once again. Well, it's now time to make the two fuel lines for the Mark IV. And I am using these PTFE lines for this. So the rest of the fuel system is not PTFE, and I will end up changing it over at some point in time in the future. But for right now, since I have to remake these two lines, we're going to use PTFE for them. And if you guys did not see in the Lexus build series, when I did all the plumbing work on that, and didn't see my explanation on PTFE stuff then, or if you have not used PTFE lines before, let's go ahead and do a quick dissection, a quick anatomy of them, if you will. So the line itself is a PTFE line. You can see this white plastic on the inside of it. It's a Teflon liner that is resistant to virtually all types of fuels and fluids that you could use on a car project. So they also, or with that in mind, they take special hose ends to assemble them. And this is one of them right here. So we have the actual angled hose end itself. We have the line nut right here. And then we have the crush sleeve or the olive. And the way that these go together is the nut goes over top of the hose first. Then we sink the olive down onto the Teflon liner. And if you see this side of the hose right here, you can see that it's already expanded and everything else for the olive to go in place. And it's a little bit counterintuitive from the way that you would assemble a normal AN line or a more traditional style one. As if they fray out like this, well, then you essentially have to cut the end of the line off and get it so it is not frayed out. With PTFE lines, it is desired to have them frayed like this, and you'll see why here in a moment. And then last but not least, we also have the hose end itself, and it has this nipple on it that slides inside of the Teflon liner. And as you tighten everything down, it crushes the olive over top of the Teflon liner, and when everything is smashed together, it creates a leak-proof seal that way, ideally at least. Tech tip for you guys: when you're working with these PTFE fittings or PTFE hose ends, the hose ends are not swivel hose ends like a normal traditional hose end. So what I do is I seat the hose end, meaning that I tighten down the hose end to the nut and crush the olive, the compression sleeve and all of that, but then I back it off a little bit. And in doing so, that allows me the opportunity to swivel these things around on this joint right here, if you guys can see that. So once I get everything installed into the car, I'll then come in, and once everything's clocked appropriately, and I'll do my final tightening. So it's important to grab the nut, in this case, with an adjustable wrench, but it's probably a little bit dark for you guys to be able to see appropriately, but what I'm doing right now is aligning the flats. And I like to go pretty much as far as I can and get everything aligned appropriately. So need a little bit more. How's that? Probably a smidge more. And there, I'm pretty happy with that. Everything's aligned, everything is tight, and now the plumbing is done. All right, on to what I think is the last of what we need to do right now, which is to add coolant. For this car, I just run straight water. There isn't really much of a need to run anything else. You just have to be cognizant if it's going to freeze outside, meaning that if the temperature will drop below freezing, to keep the car above freezing. Otherwise you'll have a bad time. So I'm using the no spill funnel again. This time it should actually be a no spill endeavor, I'm hoping, as I can run the electric water pump without the car running and avoid a lot of the volatility that we had with the SC, if you remember that disaster. So I'll let this consume as much water as it wants to and kind of burp things out as it needs to, and then I will kick the electric water pump on and allow all of this to circulate and to burp the car. And it's a nice, easy way to do that. If you have an electric water pump, I highly recommend having an override switch so you can burp the cooling system in this manner. So it looks like this is calming down for the most part. So I'll kick the pump on. See if we get anything. Taking some water, that's a good thing. And I'm having to cycle the pump on and off just to kind of disturb what's going on inside of there to make it burp correctly. And do we have anything on the ground? Maybe. Is that actually leaking, or is it? Oh, we do have a leak. Great. Okay. So I need to pull the fill pot off and reseal that. Not what I wanted to do. All right, so I resealed the fill pot. Hopefully it's good to go at this point. And let's get back to the same process that we were doing. So let me kick the pump on. See, it's definitely burping some stuff out. That's a good thing. There you go. See if we're leaking anything again. Hopefully not. Looks dry. That's good. You can definitely hear the pump is quieted down quite a bit, which definitely a good thing. That's what I was looking for. Same as a fuel pump, once there's actual fluid circulating through, then the pump will be quiet, it'll be happy and all of that, and still don't see any leaks. So definitely happy. I'm definitely happy about that. Okay, so it doesn't seem to be taking any more water, and it doesn't seem to be shoving an exorbitant amount of bubbles up into the no-spill funnel anymore. So I think we're good enough, at least for right now, to fire this thing up. And may have said it earlier, may have not, but this car doesn't take a huge volume of coolant. Between the radiator being smaller, the block being partially filled, and this car doesn't have a heater core or anything like that, obviously, it doesn't take all that much water. So let me pull this off of here, try not to make a giant mess. And just give me a second, and then let's go ahead and try to fire this thing up. All right, we need to do a little bit of preliminary work, or at least Haltech's setup, namely just the throttle sweep, so that way the car actually knows where it is in regards to the throttle position sensor. So if I connect to this, all the injectors still work. That's good, even though that isn't exactly what I was looking for right now. So right now the TPS is sitting at 17%. And as I go wide open, that's working. It's taking a log each time that I do that, which is kind of funny. But just have to remember in here where the TPS is. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to go back and put a little bit into the throttle body. Just had to figure out where that was, but we're good to go now. There we go. Okay. After the technical difficulties, I think we should be all right. So we're back to 17% TPS. So let's try this. There's 0. There's 100. We're good to go. Okay. TPS is set. And let's see if this thing fires up. Great success! It took a little bit to get the car started, but it does not start easily, factoring in the surge tank and everything else along those lines. But the car is up and running again, and I am elated right now. But I have another Haltech thing that I want to play around with on this thing, and it is something called rotational idle. So if you guys are familiar with Haltech's NSP software, or I think a variety of other ECUs do this, rotational idle is, as its name entails, and as my understanding goes, it eliminates or it drops one cylinder per revolution of the engine. So I think, if I remember correctly, and don't quote me on this, but I think that it has something to do with anti-lag, or that's its intended function. But a secondary function of it is essentially a ghost cam. And as ricey as that is to say, the GSC cams that are in this car, although they make a ton of power and they're awesome cams, they don't lope all that much. And the racer inside of me wants to get that lope back. So let me set you guys on the tripod, and I'll play around with a few of the rotational idle settings, and let's see if we can't make this thing sound pretty wild and pretty mean. Well, a rousing success with the rotational idle stuff and the car just running in, or above all. Car runs great, still needs to be tuned, obviously. You can hear that it's still a little bit dirty on free revs, but that will be solved once Bob works his magic with the tune. But I wanted to show you guys in the NSP software, if we scroll down to vehicle functions and rotational idle. So rotational idle, if we look it up real quick. So the actual function and definition of it is rotational idle is used to maintain a low or a normal low idle speed when a fixed larger amount of air is being used for lift-off anti-lag purposes. Or if you just want to sound like a legend when your engine does not perform. That's kind of where I fall in. So it gives you some examples and things along those lines, and you guys can Google or search for Haltech rotational idle and read through this whole page if you'd like to. But the point being is this is how I have it set up in this car. So the car idles somewhere around 1,000 to 1,050 RPM, somewhere in that range. It'll bounce up and down a little bit from there, a little bit of variance, but that is kind of the sweet spot for it, at least with the way that I have the throttle body set right now and just having it set where it sounds good to my ear. So what I did is I set an ignition, or an injection cut rather, at 1,025 RPM. So it's a very subtle cut, but I didn't want it to be something huge and pronounced and sound kind of cartoonishly lopey. I wanted it to sound clean and crisp and like it's supposed to sound like that. And I think I was able to accomplish that. So the different functions right here, if we do activating engine demand, the engine demand has to be less than or equal to this value for rotational idle to operate. So I set this as low as I possibly could so it will function, or the rotational idle will function just at idle. End RPM, when above this RPM all cylinders will be cut. This should be set to give the engine a stable idle, typically set a little higher than the RPM the engine would normally idle at. There's no anti-lag system. So I went inverted from that to make it lope. We have soft cut, and we also have a cut off function, which did not really seem to do anything. And then cut methods, we have a variety of different ones. So pretty self-explanatory. One is an ignition cut, where it will kill a coil on one of the cylinders for each rotation of the engine. And I'll be speaking in terms of for each rotation of the engine. We have an injection cut, which is what I used. We have ignition and injection at the same RPM, so it's cutting both, kind of really killing a cylinder. Ignition with injection 100 RPM above, so a little bit staggered that way, and then injection with ignition 100 RPM above. So I have a variety of different options that I can choose from, but after playing with them, as you guys saw from the little computer fiddling montage that I did, or when you guys were sitting behind and you heard all the different ways the car sounded, this is what I've settled on that gets me the sound and everything that I was looking for. And I can always change this to be more aggressive or less aggressive if I choose to do so. But it's kind of cool to have cams available, or at least the loping of cams available through this function in the ECU, and then the old skull and crossbones button right there. Well, this morning, with the help of my buddy Vlad, who, if you guys have seen his beautiful Quicksilver Mark IV Supra 6-speed drag car, he is a phenomenal tuner. And we got to talking last night about some of the settings and what I was working on with this car. And he offered a few suggestions for idle tuning, for fuel tuning, for things along those lines. Things that I can use to kind of set the foundation and the groundwork to make Bob's life easier when he is actually doing the tune on this car. And I'm happy to report that we have eliminated the need for the rotational idle settings. Now, I'll show you guys what we have going on here, and then we can hear what the actual sound is like, because it's pretty wild. So, on this table right here, let me zoom you in a little bit, but this is the idle control ignition correction table. And as the axes show, if the RPM is plus or minus 25 RPM from the commanded idle, it's doing nothing with the timing. It's 0 degrees. But as we go out either way, it's swinging 40 degrees back and forth. And what that equates to is a really aggressive, really choppy idle. In addition to these idle changes that we made, I also figured out the dirty spot that has plagued this car with free revving, and that was launch control. It was set at 5,000 RPM, and as I was playing around free revving it, I noticed that the engine limiting function right here was kicking into the launch control section. So I simply raised that to 7,000 RPM, and now it revs cleanly through 5,000 RPM. So with all of that being said, let me put you guys on the tripod and let's hear what this thing sounds like with this new idle control strategy, and we'll do a couple of good free revs now that we can get through that 5,000 RPM barrier. Now that is what I'm talking about. This thing sounds crazy now, and I think I'm actually going to implement that same idle control strategy over on the SC. So let's do that real quick and see if we can make that car lope as well, and then we'll call this a successful video at that point in time. Well, there we go. So I did a little bit less aggressive of a chop tune on the SC. It is only swinging 7.5 degrees positive or negative, so 15 degrees overall, as opposed to plus or minus 20 or 40 degrees that the Mark IV is swinging. So I wanted this to be a little bit more sedate and a little bit more reasonable, since it's supposed to be a comfy street car, and I think I was able to accomplish that. Well, another successful episode with the Mark IV, and a huge thank you to my buddy Vlad for helping me get the idle stuff squared away and get the car sounding the way that I want it to. And as an added bonus, like you guys just saw, I was able to implement the same strategy onto the SC, and now both of these cars sound the way that I want them to and function the way I want them to. So with that being said, I think this is a good place to leave off for this episode. And I guess now the Mark IV, for all intents and purposes, is ready to go back to the dyno. The car is mechanically sound, and I need to get another drum of fuel. I need to get nitrous bottles filled, and then figure out with Bob when we can schedule to get this thing on the dyno and get it dialed in. Beyond that, at this point in time, and fingers crossed it actually works out this way, but FedEx evidently has found the tires for the SC that were lost in translation somewhere. So they are scheduled to arrive for me tomorrow, and if that does happen, then in the next episode, we'll be able to get this thing on a new set of rubber, and at that point in time, it should be ready to go out on the road, at least for a brief drive. I'd still like to do a brake job to this before it sees any significant street duty, as the brakes that are on it, I think the last time they've been changed, or the last time they were changed, I should say, was when I did them when I was like 17 years old. So that is something that should be addressed, and we can do a little OE big brake upgrade for it as well. But that will all be in the future, and right now we're done with this episode. So thank you guys, as always, for coming along on all these different journeys and all of these different adventures with me. We're back to a full fleet of running Toyotas, which is a huge thing. It's something I'm excited about, and something that has been a rare occurrence for the longest time. But with this car back together and all happy and running nicely and everything, I am elated with how this has all came together. I mean, just look at the new intake manifold, look at the way this whole engine bay is packaged together. I could not be happier with it. And I could not be more excited that the Aristo project is looming in the very near future as well. Like I said in the last episode, I put together, I should say, a spreadsheet of all of the engine components that will end up being used on it, and we'll be moving on that very shortly. I could not be more excited for this car and the vision that I have for it. I can't wait to show you guys, and I can't wait to get it underway and get it all wrapped up and everything and be able to enjoy it. And last but not least, we have the old Mark II. And it has not been a huge priority, at least not during the cold season that seems to be still dragging on here. But I'll get that car wrapped up soon as well. Like I said, it just needs a little bit of tune work and a little bit of work with the distributor to get it where the engine and the ECU are both reading or presenting the correct and synchronized RPM. Once that's done, that car can go out and drive as well. And very soon, I will be able to choose, or to pick and choose, which one of the Toyota projects I'd like to take out on any given day. So as always, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, check out the website for manifolds, for merch, for all things good that way, including my MCB collection. That is the newest apparel and accessory collection that I have, and I have a variety of offerings in a really cool multicam black colorway that I really like a whole lot. So if you guys like it as well, feel free to pick up any of those items, and if not, well then hopefully I offer something in the future that does speak to you and that you would like to add to your collection. But with all of that being said, that will be the end of this one, and I will see you guys in the next episode.